For many years, I really struggled to quit smoking weed, and it was genuinely ruining my life. I was not productive, I was feeling lethargic all the time, and I hated myself. And it wasn't that I didn't want to quit, I wanted to quit, but there were deeper reasons at play that were just holding me back. In this video, I will share 5 reasons that were holding me back, and the last one is where everything changed for me. Reason number 1, escapism from uncomfortable emotions. During my teenage years, I was struggling with a lot of anger issues, self-esteem. I was incredibly insecure. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to impress people. And these underlying negative emotions led me to try weed. I wanted to impress my friends. This was the first time I smoked weed. And I enjoyed it the first time, to be honest. But as the time went on, it became a massive hindrance. I was no longer enjoying anything, especially studying. Anything that was difficult, I would just avoid it. Initially, weed was a social drug for me, but then I also started smoking it by myself, which is when it became extremely dangerous. So whenever I was feeling frustrated, doubts, lonely, guess what I would turn to? Weed. Why did I turn to weed? Instead of addressing those emotions, trying to understand them, where do they stem from? I would just take the easy way out, smoke weed, cloud my judgment, and keep myself numb. And this numbness then later on was one of the biggest reasons for why I did terrible in my A-levels. I missed out on UCL and King's College London. And in my retake year, when I quit weed, that was one of the biggest changes I made, that I was able to get into King's College London. And that was because my judgment was no longer clouded. So that was the first reason for why weed was holding me back, because I was emotionally overwhelmed. Reason 2. Shame makes the cycle worse. So many people struggle with this. They smoke weed, they feel terrible after, and then in order to escape that terrible feeling, they go back to smoking weed. And it is very easy whenever you lapse or relapse with any sort of addiction to be incredibly harsh to yourself and beat yourself up, call yourself a loser, be mad at yourself, feel like you have lost all progress. But that is the most unproductive thing you can do. The most productive thing you can do in the times you mess up is that it is human. That yes, of course, this does not enforce or this does not justify negative behaviors. But when you give yourself grace, you don't go back into that loop of negative emotions. Because what are you gonna do? If you make yourself feel guilty about it to an extent where you're really talking like you're your enemy about yourself, then you're gonna just go back to smoking weed because you would wanna avoid those negative emotions. So this will be one of the biggest things that will hold you back, and it was holding me back, is that shame cycle. And in order to escape that, one must start with showing grace to themselves. Reason 3, lack of direction and purpose. When you don't have a clear direction in your life of what you want to do, what you are striving towards, having something bigger than yourself, it is very easy to feel lost. And in your teenage years, like I was, incredibly susceptible to this feeling, because I went through this nihilistic stage in my life where I was like, what's the point of life? We're all gonna die anyways. And I enjoyed nothing about life. Partly was to do with trauma because of nearly losing my sister at such a young age. Thank God she survived, but the trauma was still there. So that nihilism, that lack of purpose of what I want to do with my life, having no goal and not believing in myself as well. Like, oh, I'm too dumb to get into a university. Like one time my teacher asked me like, oh Khushal, in terms of uni, what are you thinking about? And I chuckled, I'm like, uni? Like, me, uni? Like, no, I'm not that smart. I told him that. And that lack of purpose, that lack of self-esteem, in order to fill up that void of feeling okay about yourself, guess what we turn to? Weed. Because it makes us feel good in that moment. It makes us forget about these uncomfortable feelings of nihilism, of emptiness. And instead of becoming comfortable with that uncertainty and finding that direction and trying and not being afraid of failing, it's much easier to turn to the comfortable thing, which is to smoke weed or choose any form of escape in order to distract ourselves. For me, things started to really change when I started boxing, when I started taking part in debate clubs, when I started reading, started to understand my trauma, mental health books, things of this nature. When I really stepped out of my comfort zone is when that sense of purpose started to feel ignited. Purpose is not just gonna magically appear in your life. You have to take actions, and it doesn't have to be a huge actions. We all have a little inner voice in our head, a tiny one, and that voice is an incredible voice to listen to. And the reason why it's so quiet and so tiny is because we are overwhelmed with so much distractions. We got social media making us feel like we are not enough. It's making us feel like, what's the point of anything, because we see so much negativity online. And we can end up feeling incredibly lost. But if you start with the little things, for example, working out, it could be just one thing initially if you feel incredibly overwhelmed, and just keep that one thing consistent in your life, you would start to see things change for you. You will start to have goals that you want to strive towards. For me, it was boxing. Like, one of the biggest reasons why I was able to quit weed is because I didn't want to get beat up in sparring. And you learn the hard way. And that was a big motivator because, I want to perform. I want to do well. Give yourself such incentives, take such initiatives, and then naturally you will be like, no, this is going to hinder my progress in what I'm trying to achieve and who I'm trying to become. So purpose doesn't just give you motivation, it also reduces your urge to escape yourself. Reason 4, I didn't trust my ability to handle the future. In my childhood, there was a lot of uncertainty in my life. When I was little, we moved houses like 5-6 times, and that's actually seen as one of the biggest contributions to depression by many studies. And then we were also internally displaced. The Taliban took over our home, we were away, and then unfortunately there was an assassination attempt on my sister Malala, and we had to come to the UK, and then within the UK we moved houses like 3-4 times. So I was incredibly uncertain about the future because I thought like everything was just gonna go bad for me, because the second things would go well, things would go bad. So when there was some sort of stability in my life, I would just take the initiative to make it worse. I just didn't trust my ability to be able to handle the future, because I'm like, things are gonna go bad and things haven't gone well so far, so let me go and make it worse. So I would start smoking weed again. I would quit and then I would go back to weed because life seemed too good to be true. For example, I had a constant dread of existential anxiety. I feared that someone was gonna die. And anytime my dad would call me, I would be like, oh, is everything okay? Because I didn't trust myself that in case, God forbid, something terrible was gonna happen, for example, failing my exams, someone dying, that I would collapse, that I would be destroyed, that I might become suicidal. And because I didn't trust the future, I didn't trust myself, I would start smoking weed because I'm like, if life is gonna get worse anyways, might as well take it into my own hands. So it was also this self-sabotage cycle which just kept me in this limbo of quitting weed and then going back to it, quitting weed, going back to it. And I hated myself for it. It became incredibly exhausting. It was one of the darkest moments of my life because I was trying so hard to quit. I didn't let the future Khushal to take care of future problems. And instead, I would constantly be daydreaming about how things are going to go bad rather than focusing on today, the present moment. Because tomorrow is not guaranteed. We don't know what's going to happen. Actually, nothing may happen. For example, Seneca has this beautiful quote, "We suffer more in our imagination than in reality." And I was the prime example of that. These things, most of it didn't even happen, but I let it hold me back. And when I became more present through praying, meditation, getting closer to God, there are many other methods and techniques in order to become more present and to actually focus on your current self. What can you do today? Forget about the future. What can you do in this moment right now in order to make your life better? And that will take a lot of the anxiety away. So the fourth reason why I was struggling to quit weed was a lack of trust in my ability to be able to handle the future. And the solution was to become more present. Reason 5. One of the biggest reasons that was holding me back from quitting weed was my environment. You may have heard this quote, You are the product of your environment. And my environment was primed for me to stay a smoker because weed was very accessible to me. My friends smoked it, or the spaces I went to, people would smoke it, and it just became incredibly difficult to quit it. Because whenever I saw that XYZ friend, or whenever I was in that space, whenever it was like evening time, I felt bored and lonely, I would just turn to weed. And in order to quit, I recommend you read Atomic Habits. One of the most life-changing advice I learned from that book was making the bad habits difficult to achieve. So what that means is creating as many steps between you and the bad habit. So I got rid of all the dealer numbers. I stopped hanging out with friends that smoked weed. I stopped going to those spaces. And it was actually one of the biggest and easiest way to quit weed, because I created space between my bad habit and myself. Because you only have so much willpower. You can go to a social event and you may, everyone might be smoking weed around you. And of course you're going to be tempted. It's human, especially if you have a negative history with such some substances where you are dependent on it, or you were dependent on it, like myself. Stay away from those environments because they're not good for you. And you have to create environments where it's very easy to be productive. For example, it's much harder to revise in your bedroom because your bed is there, there's distractions there, you can play a game, your computer, than in library. Why? Because the library has less distractions. You only have your laptop and your books. There's nothing else to do. So your environment is one of the biggest things that's gonna either hold you back or is gonna help you quit weed. Waiting for the perfect time to quit. But guess what? That perfect time never comes. This is so ridiculous, but I had 6 months left till my exams, my A-level exams, which I thought I was gonna fail. Imagine I have offer from King's College London and UCL, and a lot is on stake. And I tell myself like, okay, you know what? 4 months leading up, I'm gonna quit. 4 months come. I'm like, okay, okay, let's make it 2 months. This will be the last time, because that fear of regret, that whoa, if I fail my exams because of weed, it's gonna kill me, it's gonna destroy me. Anyways, 2 months come by, and I'm still smoking weed. I quit for a week, and then what ended up happening was I actually smoked weed 2 weeks before my exam, and I felt terrible. I felt absolutely terrible about myself. And a couple of days before exam, I also had a massive panic attack. My parents went home. I was in my bed shivering. It was one of the loneliest periods of my life. I did not sleep 1 hour, shaking in my bed the whole time, because I was just waiting for the perfect time to change my life. And I hit rock bottom. And when I hit rock bottom, that's when I started to turn things around. After not getting into my dream universities, that's when I learned. And after retaking, I was able to get into King's College London. But again, I was negotiating with myself that, once I graduate from university, then I'm gonna quit. But then I realized, like, why am I postponing my success? Why am I postponing becoming the best version of myself? When I was in uni, I was actually doing quite well. I was putting on some of the biggest events. I was achieving good grades, but weed was still holding me back. It was making me overthink. It was making me paranoid. And I had to ask myself this deep question, like, who is it that I want to become? And I created this analogy that, imagine there was a Khushal in another parallel universe who doesn't smoke weed. Who's going to do better in life? That Khushal or this Khushal? Of course, the Khushal who doesn't smoke weed at all. And if you have like an extreme personality like myself, and you have history with addictions and dependency on such substances, for me, what I learned was like I could not balance it. I had to just completely cut it out of my life. Have I lapsed since then? Couple times, but it's been more than 2-3 years that I haven't smoked weed consistently. And I'm happier than ever. It's completely changed my life. I'm more present, I'm healthier, I'm doing incredibly well in my life. And it was one of the biggest changes I made in my life in order to actually make it better. And I really empathize with you if you're struggling with weed, and I don't want you to have any shame about it, because I'm related to a really famous sibling, Malala Yousafzai, who is the youngest Nobel Peace Prize winner. And I was incredibly mean to myself, like, okay, I'm disgracing the family name. I'm being incredibly, I'm a loser. I'm a horrible human being. No, you're not a horrible human being. Listen, in our teenage years, we do stupid things, and it's human. Show yourself grace. You're gonna learn from this. You're gonna become a better person from this. There's opportunity in whenever you make mistake, or whenever you come short, or whenever you fail. There is no such thing as failure if you learn from it. And I want you to be kind to yourself because you're a human. This whole idea of perfection, like, oh, we need to be perfectly constantly, is making us feel not enough. And that's why we turn to these bad substances. That's why we become dependent on bad habits. So show yourself grace. Don't be so hard on yourself. Like, you wouldn't speak to your best friend like the way you speak to yourself whenever you mess up. So why should you speak to yourself that way? And why should you postpone and not give yourself the gift of being kind to yourself? These are some of the questions I want you to reflect on. If you found this video useful, please like and subscribe. And I beg, if you guys have any questions, drop them in the comment below. I'm happy to help. I know how challenging this can be, so I wish you all the best.